Hello, welcome to Urakedmi. At Urakedmi today, we will deal with Introduction to Reader Response Theory. At Urakedmi, we have been dealing with topics concerning literary theory and criticism for a while now, and we have got a good database of lectures which cover various literary theories and topics related to literary criticism. If you want to access any of the lectures regarding literary theory, you can visit the home page of Urakedmi, go to the playlist section. Under the playlist section, you can go to the playlist titled Literary Theory and Criticism, and you will find more than 90 lectures concerning various topics of literary theory and criticism. Continuing with the series of lectures on theory and criticism, today we will deal with reader response theory. You can also subscribe to Urakedmi, click the bell icon button so that you will get notification as we upload other videos and lectures on Urakedmi. Now coming to today's lecture on reader response theory. Now, in order to understand reader response theory, we'll have to go slightly in context of the new criticism. You need to have the first-hand information of the new criticism, because two theories, reader response theory and the new criticism, will have their seeds in the decade of 1920s and 30s. When we go back and take a look at how the things were unfolding among the academicians in the universities of Europe, the attitude of readers towards the text was changing, and one such critic, who wrote exclusively during the decade of 20s was I.A. Richards. His famous essay as well as a book concerning practical criticism even holds a great repute among the theories in the present times also, when we study theories in context of the new criticism. So there was an attitude of reluctance towards the significance of reader in producing the meaning of the text. Because we know from the practical criticism, if you don't know much about practical criticism, you can check out this link that has popped up at the top of this video, and it will take you to a lecture on the practical criticism by I.A. Richards. And if you already know about practical criticism, it was an approach wherein readers' responses, our readers' experience, his knowledge, his intentions were not taken into the consideration for producing the meaning of the text through practical criticism. And also the historical context, the biographical context, the personal registrations, the moral context, the paraphrasing, the synopsis, nothing was taken into account when one had to develop the meaning or produce the meaning of the text. Now, following the footsteps of I.A. Richards, who wrote in 1920s, J.C. Ransom, along with Wimsatt and Birdsley and Alan Tate and R.P. Blackmer, would go on to establish a new way of approaching the text in 1940s that we know new criticism. And we know that in the decade of 1940s, new criticism was very influential, or it influenced quite a number of readings. And for that matter, when we go beyond 1960s, when, for example, a deconstruction approach comes up, it also takes a leaf out of the books of the new critic theorists are from the book of the new critics. And later we know how Roland Barth would also write The Death of the Author and other works, and they continue to influence in one way or the other way. Therefore, the attitude that had developed during 1920s towards the reader was that reader was in no way important or significant in producing the meaning of a text. But come the 1970s and 80s, there was a change in this attitude, and that was through the revival of reader response theories at the hands of particularly Louise Rosenblatt and Wolfgang Iser, Stanely Fish and others. Now, what these writers would do, they would again attempt to give the place back to the reader that it had perhaps, or he had, or she had perhaps before this new criticism had come onto the scene. So it was like regaining the seat of a reader, regaining the significance of a reader. Now that was a slight context. So we can also say that reader response theory, which initially developed parallel to new criticism, when the seeds of new criticism were being sown, at the same time reader response theory was also trying to come up, but then the famousness of the influence of new criticism did not allow reader response theory to rise that high in significance. But once the importance, once the essence of neocriticism started reducing during 70s and 80s, reader response theory started gaining momentum back, and more importantly, readers started becoming more important in context of the generation of meaning of a text. Now, reader response theory, as the title suggests, is all about the responses of the reader in the production of the meaning of a text. Therefore, whenever we talk about reader response theory, mostly students would become slightly enthusiastic if they are asked to implement this kind of approach, that is reader response approach to the text, because they would for a while perhaps believe that their responses are important. Now, if they interpret a text, they write something about text as they think is right, would be considered right because it is their response and they have their say in determining the knowledge, or determining rather the meaning of the text. But a reader response theory is not that simple, is not that easy. It's not that any Tom, Dick and Harry goes and reads a book, presents to us a particular form of interpretation and believes that that interpretation would be correct. Reader response theory is a well organized theory with specific concepts, with pretty organized measures also, in order to think or consider that the meaning that is being produced is right or is not right. But even then, reader response theory places reader to a higher level than perhaps new critics did. Now, if you find out the contrast between new critics and the reader response theory is, new critics credited or gave all credit to the text. For them, text existed, and the text existed alone in isolation. There was no need of reader, and there was no need of the writer. Reader was initially discarded, having no role in the meaning of the text. So the meaning of the text was timeless and unchangeable. So far as writer was concerned, it was the death of the author. The moment he produced the text, he was no longer important. Now, that was new critics' stance. But when it comes to the reader response theory, reader becomes significant because Stanely Fish, Wolfgang Iser and others believed that text was not all about words on the pages. If you think about text or manuscript, it only came into existence when it was read or when it was in the hands of the reader. As long as a text, words written by a writer on a piece of paper, were kept in a shelf, were kept in museum, they were not considered as the literary work. They were not considered either as novel or as poem or as play, drama, book, whatever you think. Just written words on the pages meant nothing. But when these written words, these collected published pages went into the hands of the reader, and when he started reading, text came into the existence. A literary work came to the existence. Poem came to the existence, because it was now that reader, with his responses, with all his knowledge information, and experiences gave a particular meaning to that text, and when that meaning got the text, it came into the existence. So this is how reader response theory would mostly approach the production of the meaning of a text. And reader response theorists do not consider text as an objective entity with a meaning of their own. Something which could be studied in isolation, away from historical context, away from biographical context, without intentional fallacy, without affective fallacy. No. Reader response theorists believe that a text only gets meaning through intentional and affective fallacies. New critics believe that there should not be intentional fallacy, there should not be affective fallacies. But reader response theorists believe that when we read the text, it is our perception, our intention, our experiences, our knowledge that shapes or develops the meaning of the text. And they believe that the meaning of a text does not merely change from one reader to another, but the meaning also changes from one reading to the other. For example, if you read a poem today, a piece of writing today, you will have one kind of meaning at this point of time. But if you read the same text, say for example after 10 days, the meaning would be different, because this gap of 10 days would provide a lot of, change a lot of things. For example, you will get experience, more experience during those 10 days perhaps. Your psychological state would perhaps be different what it was 10 days ago. The amount of knowledge that you were having 10 days before would be different now. Therefore, the reading, second reading, third reading, fourth reading would give you different interpretations, different interests, and different ideas about a work of art. So what reader response theorists are basically stressing upon is the significance of a reader. Now there is another thing where you need to find out the difference between new criticism and reader response theory. New criticism focused on objective approach towards the texts. They did not only, for example, propagate an objective reading of the text, but they also propagated an objective writing of literature. If you remember T.S. Eliot, saying about the writing process, that it is not the turning loose of emotions, but it is an escape from emotions. He was talking about poetry. So T.S. Eliot was also an initial influence upon this new criticism. So they believed in objectivity. Reader response theorists believe in subjectivity, because if your experience is important, if your intention is important, I mean the intention of the reader, if the experience of the reader is important, intention of the reader is important, knowledge of the reader is important, the mental state of the reader is important, the stance of the reader is therefore subjective. So reader response theories, in contrast to new criticism, would mostly focus up on the subjectivity or subjective approach of the text. New critics mostly believed that text in itself is enough in producing the meaning. So reader has got no role to play in the development of the meaning. But when it came to reader response theories, they believe that a text in its own self can do nothing. Whatever comes out of the text highly depends upon the approach of the reader towards it. Therefore, reader response theories talked about two things, two important aspects of reader response theory, and they are: one, that the role of the reader cannot be omitted from our understanding of literature, and second, that readers do not passively consume the meaning presented to them by an objective literary text. Rather, they actively make the meaning they find in literature. Now, both these things mean somewhat same. The reader's significance. And as it says that no reader is there in the world which would take the meaning of a text perhaps established 100 years ago. But they react to the text, actively, dynamically, and with their own responses, their own experiences, their own knowledge, they try to produce new meanings in the text, different meanings in the text. And that approach helps a text to be relevant in different ages or different time. Because if we think that a play written by William Shakespeare could be studied only that it was written in a particular way in the 21st century, and the meaning of that play was fixed of its own, and we just cannot bring in other experiences, intentions, knowledge, and information that perhaps have developed over a period of 100 years, and we cannot apply those in reading the text of a play written by William Shakespeare. That would lend reading redundant or reading process redundant. So what reader response theorists did, they made the reading process more active. Now, when we look at reader response theory, that was only a context or introduction to reader response theory, how it developed and how it differed from new criticism. And why I am only talking about new criticism, because new criticism would be the closest and the biggest rival of reader response theory in the field of academia. And that is why I am comparing reader response theory most of the times with the new criticism. When it comes to the exponents of reader response theory, or the theorists of reader response theory, we have Hans Robert Joss, we have Louise Rosenblatt, we have Wolfgang Iser, and we have got Stanely Fish. Now, these 4-5 are the significant names who have developed a good number of concepts when it comes to the reader response theory. Now, in this series of lectures, we would be dealing with different types of reader response theory. For example, transactional reader response theory, affective stylistics, subjective reader response theory, psychological reader response theory, and social reader response theory. Now, these are different subdivisions of this reader response theory. Reader response theory is a one, and under that heading come all these reader response theories which have been developed by different readers. For example, transactional reader response theory would be developed by Rosenblatt and Wolfgang Iser. Affective stylistics would be dealt by Stanely Fish. So would be the others. So in the coming lectures, we will take up all these theories individually and would discuss these theories in context of their proponents, whether it be Hans Robert Joss, Louise Rosenblatt, Stanely Fish, Wolfgang Iser, or others. So what we would basically be doing, we would be covering all the reader response theorists and their concepts and ideas regarding reader response theory. As of now, in this lecture, that is all. We only dealt with the context to the reader response theory, a bit of introduction to reader response theory. Up next, we will come up with transactional reader response theory, subjective reader response theory, psychological reader response theory, social reader response theory, affective stylistics, and other dominant concepts of reader response theory. I hope that this lecture was helpful for you and you were able to get some information about the reader response theory. That is all we have at Urakedmi for today. Don't forget to share, like, comment, and subscribe at Urakedmi. For more interesting stuff, keep watching Urakedmi.